Hi guys, it's Benjamin Morgan, Chief Executive of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association of Australia, and welcome to our Facebook Live broadcast for Tuesday, the 4th of May. It's been a while since we've been here in the studio, the spare bedroom, but we're back here tonight to talk about issues that are impacting the aviation industry here in Australia, and specifically in Queensland on the Sunshine Coast. I'll just quickly throw the guests in and we'll do some quick introductions and then we'll get into the discussion. This evening, we are joined by none other than Simon McDermott of MachJet. G'day, Simon, and welcome back to the broadcast. Oh, I think he's muted down there. We have Mike Becker from Becker Helicopters. G'day, Mike.
Hey, Ben. Glad to be here.
We also have Paul McKeown from the Recreational Flying Company out of Gympie. G'day, Paul, and it's great to see you again.
Hi, Ben. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
We also have Timothy Holland from Flight Options Pilot Academy. His connection's a little bit unstable at the moment, and he'll be popping in and out. And when he gets back in, we'll do a quick introduction, but a big welcome to Tim. And also returning as part of our regular broadcast is none other than the AOPA Australia Medical Director, Dr. Sean Runacres. Sean, it's great to see you off the back.
Oh, Ben's gone. Who's hosting this now?
What should we talk about? You're going to take over, Mike.
Technology. Technology. Welcome to Sean, who joins us following a meeting down at Moorabbin just last week to learn more about the Moorabbin Airport master planning process that's currently underway. G'day, Sean.
Yeah, g'day. Thanks for having me back, Ben.
It's like the best laid plans of mice and men, isn't it? You can put as much preparation into this technology as you like, and then as soon as you hit the go button, stuff starts falling apart. Thank God aviation's a little bit more stable than that. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining AOPA in this broadcast. This series of videos and panel discussions is all about having an open and frank conversation about the issues that are impacting the participants of the aviation industry, and to give you an opportunity, in your own words, to talk about how those issues are affecting your businesses and your interactivity with pilots, aircraft owners, government and regulators. And so in tonight's broadcast, I really do invite you to speak openly and to get to the heart of the issue. This is a great opportunity not only to be communicating with the aviation industry, but also to the politicians, those senators and MPs that do watch and review these broadcasts as part of their information loop. So welcome. Now, on the Sunshine Coast up in Queensland, you've got an airport that has undergone huge transformation as a result of airport privatisation, initially being handed over to a local council for management, and now being handed over to a superannuation fund. It's probably very similar to what we have going on at Bankstown Airport, and that we now have an airport that, for all intent and purposes, now being run primarily by a property development company that really is focusing and prioritising non-aviation development. And this also relates to our conversation we'll be having a little bit later on Moorabbin Airport. But Simon, could you maybe give us a bit of an overview of what's been happening at the airport and bring our viewers up to speed?
Yeah, no worries. Well, the Sunshine Coast Airport obviously was originally a 2-runway configuration, and we've just had a expansion, or what was supposed to be an expansion, happen. We had drawings, artists' impressions, and so forth up on walls of said office buildings for the years leading up, showing a 2-runway configuration, which was great for our industry, which is what we were told we were going to be getting. And then right up to, I guess, before consultation was allowed to be had for us as operators, the council closed the 2nd runway. That's the north-south facing runway known as 1836, and they've removed it, which also removed a heap of taxiways. And now us as operators that have signed up to long-term leases there at that airport are finding ourselves very restrained.
And Simon, very similar to most of the general aviation airports, or the larger general aviation airports across the country, Sunshine Coast is an airport where we had one runway, which is primarily being used by its larger RPT operations, and we had a cross runway, which was being used predominantly by general aviation, and that was supporting flight training, charter activities, and a host of other small to medium-sized aircraft operations. And with the closure of that cross runway, what's it done to all of that general aviation business?
Well, it's basically we're the last picking at the moment. So airlines get priority. The aviation companies that are based there on that airport are basically left with the dregs. Whatever gaps the airlines have, we can fill. It's Tim and Paul will be able to talk better with the fixed wing training, because that's not the game I'm in, Ben. But certainly with our aeroplanes, we're having to line up. You know, the whole configuration has been wrong. The runway that they built, the new runway that they built has a bottleneck taxiway that's totally inefficient. And so therefore, even my FIFO aeroplanes, we're having 20-minute delays sometimes for departure.
Well, let's just roll back a step, and Paul, it might be a good opportunity to bring you into this. I mean, what was the justification for closing this cross runway, given that this runway was really predominantly used by small to medium-sized traffic? And of course, any logical person in aviation would look at this and say, hang on a minute, if you're going to take all of this small to medium-sized operations, you're going to move them onto the main runway where you've got RPT, there's going to be conflict, there's going to be congestion. Why was it that this proposal was put forward?
Well, Ben, I can't really answer that, and being only an itinerant visitor to the Sunshine Coast, I'm not privy to to all the ins and outs of what's been going on there. But when I look at it, especially given the fact that the new runway is pretty well out of the prevailing wind for most of the afternoons of the summertime, I can only imagine that they've closed the runway purely for the old runway 1836 purely for economic reasons. It's located in a beautiful sort of beachside area north of the airfield there at the Sunshine Coast, and I think it would be prime real estate for them to sell off. So I can think of no real reason other than for economic reasons did they sell it. Certainly, it couldn't be. It wouldn't pass any reasonable safety analysis to close it. I can't see any benefit for aviation, so it must be purely economic for the people that would benefit from developing that area.
Certainly hard to deny that the land that sits alongside or parallel to the beachside real estate would be worth many millions of dollars. So there'd be some fairly large motivations there for any salivating property developer that might be posing themselves as an airport manager. I mean, Mike, you've been in and around the area for quite some time, experienced aviator operating a helicopter business. What's your take on this?
Yeah, look, it's a really interesting one. Yes, we've been doing this for 30 years now, and we obviously started up at Noosa. We moved down to Sunshine Coast Airport because they wanted us to locate down there. Unfortunately, with what they're doing at the Sunshine Coast Airport, they haven't really thought about all the users. I've got one user in mind, and that's the RPT operators. You're operating 15 jet ranges for 15,000 hours a year, and with the two configuration runway. 186 was the main one, and the 123 allowed GA, but more importantly for us, we had the whole week for the runway we could use. Training area, we had a helipad, even off airfield, 1,000 acre lot that we leased that on the right base. So when they
Mike, I'm just going to have to jump in there. I think that the microphone audio for you has just degraded. What I'll just quickly do is I'm just going to drop you off and get you to reconnect. I'll throw this back to you, Paul, while we get Mike back online. But from a training perspective, obviously this displaces training operations out of the Sunshine Coast and effectively pushes you outside of the region. I mean, this basically has to result in a loss of jobs, a loss of aviation productivity for the region, doesn't it?
Well, absolutely, Ben, and I guess I'm less affected than the companies that are based at the Sunshine Coast. But I know Tim Holland, who can't join us right now because of some technical issues, would be very vocal in this regard that for flying training operations, you're really precluding the ability of a student pilot to operate out of the Sunshine Coast if the conditions are anything than absolutely favourable for the single runway. So that must be causing a massive dent in their operational capability and in safety as well. I mean, it's entirely possible, even with the best forecasting, to send a student on a training area solo, for example, and for them to come back and arrive to a single runway airfield with the crosswind exceeding the aeroplane or the student pilot's capability. In which case, there is no alternative for them short of diverting to another airfield, which is probably outside the construct of an initial solo training flight. So, look, it just seems to me to be such a ludicrous decision to close that existing 1836 strip. For training, I think it's essential. For safety, it's essential, and I can see no reason other than the fact that they wanted to sell off that valuable land to the north of the airfield at great profit. So I don't think it passes any sort of safety case or reasonable test at all.
Well, let's face it, hundreds of billions of dollars worth of residential apartments parallel to the beach certainly improves aviation safety, doesn't it? We've now got Mike back. Mike, welcome back. We'll hand back over to you.
Where did you lose me?
Basically around about the start. I apologise, mate. So if you'd like to just take it back from the top, and we'll hand the floor to you.
I'll zip backwards. Yes, we've been in the 30 years here on the Sunshine Coast. We started at Noosa. Very quickly, the councils wanted us to move to the Sunshine Coast, so they knew what they were getting when they had a helicopter business come down to the Sunshine Coast. And we're a training business, so we don't go away from the airport to do our work. We actually work on the airport. We need to do circuits and all those sorts of things. And with the two runway configuration, that worked quite well. The main runway 1836 RPT came in and out, and GA, especially helicopters, were able to operate to the west of that runway. Had a big helicopter training area. We also had 1,000 acres of land off airport that we had there that we could use. Once they closed the second runway and only have one runway configuration, in essence, we've lost over 90% of our ability to operate that airport. We're still expected to pay leases. We still have 15 jet rangers as training helicopters, yet we have one parking spot available for a helicopter. We have to try and book for a circuit and only have no more than 2 aircraft, including helicopters within the circuit. The whole place has become untenable now through design. So through design, they've made it an RPT airport, and they've made it very clear they don't want GA there. Now, they can't say that publicly because their masters, whoever they may be, can't allow that to happen because we're meant to be supplying jobs and input into the community. However, we are unable to operate. And so our business, in essence, has shut down at the Sunshine Coast Airport because we cannot operate. Fixed-wing guys now are trying to develop their businesses, and it's really great because they're seeing the things we've been complaining about for 10 years. So, everything we've said over the last 10 years, we've tried to find solutions. We've just keep getting backdoored, pushed around, not just ignored and not consulted. I still remember
it must be a certain amount of insult, Mike, when you kind of absorb the fact that much of this development has been signed off in many cases by the Department of Infrastructure, responsible for aviation in this country, and in many cases with the signature of the Deputy Prime Minister, who is the Minister for Aviation, who's supposed to be fostering and protecting the aviation industry as our minister, along with the fact that the Australian taxpayer is also pumping hundreds of millions of dollars into the hands of these private companies that now lease these airports and operate them, that we're not only paying for it, but our elected officials are selling us effectively out. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think the problem started in the 1980s when the federal government gave all these regional airports to local councils who had no idea how to run an airport. And then you get local councils who are made up of, primarily not business people, and they see aviation with lots of dollar signs. And so now they've realized over the last 25 years or so that they don't know how to run airports. They're now selling them or giving them away to big corporate organizations who do know how to make money, and it's not through GA. The money is made through car parks and ticket sales with RPT, and land. Land is the big one. So that's the way it's going. So the whole premise of if they're given an airport, they have to foster aviation, that's gone out the door now. And here we all are as GA operators, out in the wilderness trying to be heard, but we're not heard, we're not consulted, we're not listened to. I still remember the very first consultation we had with the Sunshine Coast Airport when they introduced the new runway. They asked all the tenants to come down into the Majimba room at the Sunshine Coast Airport, and we were all very excited. We all came down to have a question and answer time and listen. We came in, they had a presentation. We put our hand up and we wanted to ask a question. They said, this is not a question and answer time. This is not the place. We'll tell you what's going to happen and you can go. And we all walked out the door going in shock.
Must have been trained by CASA.
But that's how it started and that's how it finished, right? We've never had a voice.
Well, just listening to you talk, I mean, I'm holding here this lovely, great big book, a few hundred pages or more of Moorabbin Airport master plans, and this is really the root of all evil with respect to the wrongful development of privatised airports in Australia. And I was down in Melbourne attending the Moorabbin Airport Chamber of Commerce meeting where they were discussing with local stakeholders, obviously this master plan, seeking to gain as much input and feedback from the local community as to pulling this document apart. Their thinking is we need to pull this document apart. We've got to find all the areas that are inconsistent in this master plan, which is brilliant. But what I reminded them of at the meeting, I went down with Sean for that meeting, but I reminded them and said, we need to keep this in perspective here. In the case of Moorabbin, it's being managed by a $51.6 billion market capitalized professional multinational property investment and management corporation. These guys are juggernauts. And here we are the small aviation industry, small businesses, and we're being expected by our federal government to somehow be able to negotiate with these behemoth organizations with throngs of lawyers and everything stacked in their favor. And there is a real equity imbalance here at what's going on. And we see it played out, and it's manifested itself now to such an extent because you've got airports that have just been woefully developed in many cases to the cost and detriment of aviation. And if we look at Moorabbin and we look at the Sunshine Coast and we now look at Bankstown Airport and others, we're tearing up swaths of land and we are locking out aviation so that if aviation does start to emerge over the next 10 to 20 years with all this new emerging technology around autonomous aircraft and drones and air taxis and all this other stuff that actually could be providing a huge amount of thrust for the aviation industry to regrow, there'll be nowhere for these businesses to base themselves in these large capital city sites because we'll be busy housing refrigerator and air conditioning logistics centers and other non-aviation related activities. And so, I see this taking place on the Sunshine Coast. Where do you think the future is? If we fast forward another 10 years, will there be any small to medium-sized aviation left on the Sunshine Coast?
That's a good question. There's probably two things I'd like to say there. The first thing I'll jump in is with the master plans. I've been through 3 master plans at the Sunshine Coast Airport, each one different, and they're not a master plan. They are their excuse of being able to justify what they're doing. And the council used the latest master plan as a reason to shut down 1836 because they said, oh, well, we weren't going to do it, but the new master plan made that recommendation and we have no option but to sign off on it for safety reasons. So master plans are really just a big sales document based on who's writing it to get what they want. The future, I think the future is an interesting one because all these airports that we're seeing in our area, Redcliffe, Caboolture, Caloundra, Sunshine Coast, Gympie, those were airports that were built for GA, but because we're getting urban expansion and development, they're now been piquing the interest of developers and the land's worth a lot of money. So what's probably going to happen is the federal government needs to be building more airports for GA so we can be in the outer rim like we used to be. Because at the moment, we're not in the outer rim. We're right smack in the middle of it all where they want the activity and not us. So I know in our area, they've looked at these other airports, but state governments and federal governments don't see it as a priority. And so we don't get development of new, smaller airports where GA can go. So we have to hang on until we can't hang on anymore. I think if these big developers were smart, they'd buy us out. Just say, look, we want the land, and be honest with it. Say, we want the land for this. We're going to buy you out, and we go find somewhere else to go. But they don't do that. They tend to make us stay, take our lease fees, and stop us operating, so that we end up going by default with our tail between our legs because we can't make money anymore because we don't have a business. And then they get the land for nothing. Well,
it's certainly playing out, Mike. And at Sydney right now, at Bankstown, if you would like to lease yourself a Bellman hangar, and anyone that's involved in aviation knows what a Bellman hangar is. It's not an extremely large hangar, but it's also not a small hangar. A Bellman hangar at Bankstown Airport will cost you now in excess of $120,000 to $140,000 a year to rent it. And any politician that thinks that is a great outcome as a consequence of privatization, like this is what we actually introduced into our industry, they've got rocks in their head, because what it's doing is it is literally sending businesses to the wall. It is draining all of the capital, all of the financial resources out of this industry, and it's resulting in losses of jobs, it's resulting in losses of skills, it's resulting in losses of services, and it's only going to accelerate as we continue to see this, the enormous scale of non-aviation development. Because one of the other hidden dirty little secrets here is, as these airport operators jam in as much non-aviation development as they can, it's raising the property value threshold. And then the operator is able to say, but hang on a minute, we can get extraordinarily large rents from a Bunnings. We can get an extraordinarily large rent from a McDonald's. We can get an extraordinarily large rent from a air conditioning logistics center. So that airport hangar is now worth 10 times what it was previously. And either you pay or you get out. And we've got a situation at Bankstown Airport where the property manager at our airport will actually look you in the eyes and tell you, if you don't like the prices we're setting, get the hell off our airport. And he has every confidence in the world of knowing that nobody, absolutely nobody within the system is holding these people to account. They can do it, they have been doing it, and they're continuing to get away with it.
That's where the politicians need to understand the value of GA. I can understand where the developers don't see the value in GA because they make their $40,000, $50,000, $130,000 a year in ground rent, right? They're not making the money that they could make on turning over a business like RPT. But you take GA, the money we bring in doesn't necessarily go to the person that we're renting the ground from. It goes into the community. All right. We look at our business. In our business, when they did the study, we were bringing in $50 million a year into the community because all our people have jobs. We employ people. All our students stay for 2 years. All that goes into the community, not to the airport. But politicians don't recognize that, and airport developers are not interested in it because that's not their money going to their pocket. So until politicians realize that GA actually has greater economic benefits long-term for the community, well, we're going to continue to struggle. And charging us more for land rent doesn't help our businesses because that's not where our businesses generate the income. We generate because we pay salaries and things.
Well, so, aerospace and aviation is, obviously a diverse industry and injects over $160 million into the regional's economy, generates over 670 direct jobs and many more indirectly. The industry is one of the 7 high-value industries, providing $119 million in export revenue, and nominated by our council, so the Sunshine Coast Council, who closed our runway, as one of the 7 high-class jobs for the Economical Development Plan, which extends through to 2033. So they actually list general aviation as being one of the high-value industries. Yet No one listens.
So
at
obviously
all.
you're all stakeholders of the aviation industry, and in fact you're significant stakeholders because you are employing people, you're keeping skills in the industry. The output of your work is you're not only generating new pilots, but you're providing service that in many cases reaches well beyond the Sunshine Coast. I mean, Simon, as a stakeholder at the airport, do you feel that you as a stakeholder have been provided with viable pathways for you to be able to provide your feedback? And do you think that anyone's actually listening?
Absolutely not, Ben. The whole thing was they got us into a room and they basically threw the blanket over us and shut us up. Even to the fact that we went to the mayor, our Sunshine Coast mayor, who was at that point still in charge of the airport. We went to him on the 29th of May 2018 and made our concerns, raised our concerns with him after hearing some of the airport management, who was still run by council back then, stating to us quite openly that the property will be worth more to Palisades, the new owner, than Runway will be. So we actually went and raised those concerns with our mayor, and our mayor gave us his word and said, hey, listen, I absolutely, you guys have got to make sure you're heard about it. And there is no way we're going to be closing 1836, and the master plan and the input from us as tenants will be the time to have a look. So we all we all got a little bit of a false sense of security going, and we sat back a little bit and waited for the master plan process to come out, or we were waiting for it to come out, and then bang, 3 months before the master planning was even issued to us for the tenants and the community to have a look at it, they closed it and said it was all based on safety risks and that. But let's not forget, they've done, they did all the economical feasibility and that on having 2 runways. So, they got the funding to have the 2 runways. The 2 runways was there the whole way through, all the way in the airport's offices and so forth, and then bang, closed. And everything that we wrote and raised has happened, and it's clockwork.
I've said it before, Simon, these people are consummate professional property developers. They are smarter than our federal government. They have played the federal government like a very cheap fiddle, and they are masquerading around like they're actually interested in aviation, and they are laughing at us and they're laughing at the government all the way to the bank. And it is actually quite disgraceful what they get away with. A very important question in this, though, is that these master plans go through, purportedly, a rigorous review process with the Department of Infrastructure, and then they have to be signed off by the minister responsible. Now, you have, as stakeholders at the airport, leaseholders of land at the airport, businesses employing people in aviation, struggling to maintain an aviation industry in a very complex environment with its a huge degree of challenge. How many times has someone from the Department of Infrastructure reached out to you as a stakeholder at the airport and sought to interview you or survey you or gain insights from you with respect to gauging the performance of any of the historically approved master plans after they had been implemented?
Sorry, Ben, who's the Department of what?
I think that kind of says everything. So, Paul, are you in the same? Would you accept that same statement there?
Oh, absolutely, Ben. We've never been approached at all by the government. In fact, the only time we have any interaction is when we find out, the latest nefarious scheme to restrict our operations at an airfield, and we go in and fight for our operating rights. So, yeah, the only time we interact is when we're fighting them. Unfortunately, no, I've never been approached or asked for my opinion at all by the government.
And I think it's a pretty common trend. It wouldn't matter where we go in Australia at any of these privatised airports. And again, Sean, you were in the room when I made the comment to those that gathered in Moorabbin, is that I'm not aware, I'm genuinely not aware of any effort by infrastructure or the government to undertake a significant review to determine if, in fact, the development the development processes and pathways that have been engaged across the past 20 years have actually yielded any form of benefit for aviation whatsoever. And what I fear is they know that if they do that, they're going to have it in writing that they have fundamentally destroyed the aviation industry by privatising our airports. And it's strange. At the moment, we see making headlines in Australia, the government taking a fresh perspective on the privatisation of the Darwin port. And it's highly likely that that's all now going to be completely unravelled, and we're going to see the port come back under national ownership or state ownership. And it starts to raise a very interesting question. Are we in fact at that point now with aviation that the government needs to actually wake up here and realise that it has sold the industry down the Swanee, and unless it steps in and fundamentally changes course, we could have placed at risk the entire future of the aviation industry?
I think you only have to look at history, Ben. Have a look over in Europe, how much GA there is over there. It's gone. We're heading down that same track.
But Mike, is aviation disappearing because there's no longer a need for general aviation?
There's a big need for general aviation, but we can't facilitate it. Australia should actually be the busiest place on the planet right now with general aviation, because we are an empty country. And we have such great ability to do some great training. But we've got a massive storm. It's a perfect storm between what CAS has been doing, what the federal government did back in the 80s, and now what local councils are doing, where aviation now is the pariah. The general aviation is the pariah. And we are finding that instead of us booming, in our sectors, we are fighting tooth and nail just to try and survive. And it's not from lack of money, it's from lack of just not being able to operate anymore.
And Paul, so as a flight training provider, and I know you're based out at Gympie, and we've had unique challenges at Gympie. At one stage, they were wanting to, would you believe it, make the runway shorter to make it safer. Still, I dine out on this story so often when I travel around and I visit locations, and I tell people only in the paradigms of local government thinking could you ever come up with a solution that says we'll make an airport safer by making the runway shorter. It was a crazy outcome. But what it did highlight is it highlighted that there is a fundamental lack of understanding of how to make these airports work, and what aviation businesses and what the aviation community need in order for these locations to thrive. As a flight training provider, do you think that the privatisation process has driven up the costs, has made running these businesses difficult, and is it being borne by the end consumer and turning people away?
I'd have to say that the privatisation of airfields in Australia has been an abject failure for general aviation. But, that's only been one nail in the coffin, and it's been highlighted very well and articulated very well tonight. But look, airfields are such a vital piece of infrastructure for us, and really we've got our backs to the wall. And I guess that's why we're passionate about seeing the loss of, things like the runway 1836 at the Sunshine Coast. I mean, once you lose an airfield, they're extremely, or a runway, very hard to get them back again. So that's a fundamental. But there's so many hits to the industry. If it's the cost of operations for us. It's the adversarial nature of our regulator. It's the complexity of our aviation regulations and systems. It's the fact that as an aviation training provider, as a small one, it's almost impossible for me to attract foreign students, for example, because the complexities of having to run an RTO and a CRICOS operation and this, that, and the other. Paralleling systems of compliance. We've got, aviation theory exams that possibly difficult. Most students, struggle to get through them. Our systems and procedures just don't stack up, in any sort of reasonable comparison with those of other countries. And, Mike said it perfectly. There is probably no better country in the world than Australia for the for general aviation and the advancement of aviation, and yet you wouldn't know it because it's it's dying here. And so pre-COVID we're talking about now, the airlines are booming, and all those the pilots and and participants in that industry have to start somewhere, and general aviation is usually the nucleus for that. We've cut off our legs in that regard, and I don't think it's outside the realms of possibility to see that in Australia in the future we might not be doing any flying training. We might be importing all our pilots from overseas. In fact, pre-COVID we started to see a drift towards that, with 457 visa holders coming into airlines here. The world had a thirst for pilots. Flying training was booming. It just wasn't happening in Australia. No, people, the world's airlines were choosing to train their pilots in Canada and New Zealand and places that aren't naturally suited to aviation like Australia is. So we should have been getting all that work. And, the government has absolutely fallen asleep at the wheel on this, absolutely let down GA. And, the airfields that we're talking about at the moment are only just a part of that. We argue these matters on passion because we love our industry and we love what we do. But as you've highlighted tonight, Ben, it's piss in wind when we're dealing with greedy developers and savvy business people. So maybe it's time for us to really push the government, and I think maybe it's time for a white paper on aviation to get these matters sorted out once and for all, and to give GA one last sort of gasp at surviving.
There's no doubt, Paul, that
Paul.
Sorry, Ben, go ahead. I was just saying, there's no doubt the federal government needs to step in and rein these local councils in, because they're so different. Every single council's different. Like, I tried to come to Gympie, as you know, and I actually bought 4.5 hectares of freehold land at the Gympie airport on the handshake deal with the then mayor and CEO. We put the DA in, and 2 weeks later, they then write it up in Ursa that no helicopters are allowed to hover at Gympie Airport. And why? No one would tell me why. Probably because Mrs. Jones down the road complained about noise, and so they just did that to stop helicopters. So, that's a ludicrous decision by a council who wanted economic development, a company that was offering it. Yet as soon as we spend the money and actually go there, they then cut us off at the knees. You can't have councils doing that. That is just ludicrous. And a federal government, because the state government wasn't going to step in, needs to take charge of these airports again, so GA can actually understand what football field we're playing on.
Well, again, this comes down to government policy setting, and I've raised this issue previously, and I fear that sometimes it feels like I've just been raising it to deaf, blind and stupid people who in government just don't care about the issue. But that is, we need to take a sensible approach to managing airports in this country like other leading countries have. And one example of managing airports successfully is to create noise exclusion zones. Now, in countries around the world, it's regarded that rail infrastructure is absolutely critical to keeping goods and services running for the nation. And if you bought a house along a rail corridor, they just create zones and they say, bad luck. If you buy a house within this zone, you can't go making noise complaints. And if you do, they're just automatically going to be ignored, because the greater good of the nation is what's at stake. And I fail to appreciate or understand how government does not appreciate and value that these airports are, in fact, intrinsically tied to the success of the nation and need to be protected. It would save millions of dollars in local government expenses in processing and handling, fruitless, vexatious noise complaints that happen once, and then in 5 years later, when the house is sold again, it happens again, and in 5 years later, when the house is sold again, it happens again, over and over and over. And so sensible solutions need to be adopted, but you need to have a government that's willing to listen. Unfortunately, I fear that in many cases, the government is not listening. And that raises my next question, and that is, we have local members. These politicians in Canberra are supposed to be our representatives in government. They are supposed to be there to represent our interests to the government, not represent the government's interests in imposing on us. And this seems to be a fundamental kind of misunderstanding by many of these politicians, that maybe they've forgotten that they're there to represent us. Do you feel, have you approached your local members? Do you feel that your local politicians are even taking interest in this issue? Have they responded to you? Are they being of any assistance whatsoever? And we'll start with Simon.
Well, for the Sunshine Coast, where our business is at the Sunshine Coast Airport, it's been pretty non-existent for a politician to come and listen to us about this. our NUSA.
Who is your local member there, Simon?
I believe it's Ted O'Brien. Yeah, so he's a no-show. Obviously, we also invited him to our tenant meetings. Our Sunshine. We started a Sunshine Coast Tenant Association there, Ben, at the airport, to try and get everyone on the same side, and basically, instead of letting the airport play each tenant off against each other. So we asked Ted to attend a few of these meetings, and Ted declined to help us out there with that, and he was actually the one that I believe kicked off the federal funding for this airport build, mate. So but saying that, in our other business up at Karoi, we've got brilliant members up there. We've got Sandy Bolton and a good council. So at the moment, so it's yeah, Sunshine Coast not so good.
Mike, what about yourself? You had any luck with local politicians? Has anyone shown any interest whatsoever?
Never met the mayor. He's never been to our place. I did have a couple of councillors come in, but they will come and really just give you a bit of lip surface, then they disappear. State, I've had State try to help, and the last meeting I had with the state politician, she was in a meeting with the then airport manager at the time, and at the end of the meeting she said, it's obvious they don't want you there, you just have to go find somewhere else. That's all they could do. And then when I get to federal politicians like Ted, they have no clue. They just like a deer in headlights, nodding their head. They just need votes, and they get votes with money. So get a big infrastructure project. Oh, look, on my chart, I can show you all these people we're employing. And it's not about helping an industry. It's about helping them get into power and stay there. So no, I've never had any success with any politician helping us at all in any manner.
Paul, what about yourself, mate? Do you think the politicians care about the plight of the industry, and have you had any luck engaging with any of them?
Well, I actually had Warren Truss, the then member for Wide Bay, open my flying school originally. He unveiled the plaque. He did a pretty good job at that. But since then, no, not too much, unfortunately. And the current member, Lou O'Brien, look, I tried to get him involved on a couple of occasions when we're fighting the Gympie Council, for the airfield, including the infamous, runway shortening fiasco. But I got no joy out of him at all. So no, I don't think there's any votes in it, Ben. The contribution we make to the community is a little bit nebulous, I suppose. They don't see the big ka-ching in the piggy bank with us. We are more of an indirect contributor, not taking anything away from that, because I think we contribute far and above our weight, but I don't think we're visible enough to be of interest to them. I don't think their tenure is long enough for them to hold an interest in aviation or the long-term future of what we're doing. So, no, I don't hold out much hope to get any help from politicians.
All the more reason why it's critical that the Department of Infrastructure starts to take these issues a lot more seriously and starts to develop a framework to appropriately review the performance of these airports in respect of industry longevity and sustainability, because if it doesn't happen, there may not be an aviation industry left. So I guess a lot of bureaucrats in Canberra might be trying to find new aviation things to do to make it look like they can earn a living. Sean, now you've been very quiet there, and I've had you in the back of this conversation getting ready to cross to you. Everything we're hearing here this evening is basically what we've heard down at Moorabbin, and I know it's definitely what I've been hearing at Bankstown. I mean, what's your reflections on this?
I just think that at this point in time, we are not considered important by the people who've got the money. I've done a little bit of light reading, puts me to sleep at night. The master plan for Moorabbin, $800 million. Moorabbin Airport are telling us how they have and are about to invest in Moorabbin Airport. I can tell you that it looks like about 25 million of that has gone on aviation. They've shortened a runway. They put up a sign to say noise abatement procedures, which has since disappeared. And they've replaced some runway lights and resurfaced some runways. I mean, they're doing no aviation. They've destroyed 7 hangars. They're destroying businesses. They've got further plans to destroy more hangars and more businesses. We have a problem. If you want aviation in Australia in any capacity, then we need to start making changes now, or we're going to be importing people who can fly an aeroplane.
I mean, I had the opportunity to join you at Moorabbin last week, and we went for a walk around the airport site. We took a look at all the buildings, and I have to say, I'm shocked. You know, the buildings down there are buildings from the 1960s or the 1950s, or worse, the 1940s. And aside from building a new facility for Soar Aviation, which clearly was built on the back of a significant investment by the federal government's VET schemes through Box Hill TAFE, there really has been very little, if any, investment in facilities for general aviation. So if you are a general aviation business and you want to set yourself up in the Melbourne metropolitan, you want to create jobs and opportunity, and you want to innovate in aviation, there really does appear to be absolutely no opportunities whatsoever from an airport site that belongs to the Australian taxpayer and is supposedly being managed on behalf of the taxpayer to the benefit of the aviation industry.
So, we'll go through that. For the last 20 years, there's been 39 hangars at Moorabbin Airport. There's been no hangars built in that time. Oh, there's been one hangar built, but it was built by private enterprise. They've just destroyed 7. The only thing that they have built at Moorabbin Airport is a new passenger terminal, which conveniently happens to house Moorabbin Airport Corporation offices as well. They've done nothing for the airport. And you're right, the hangars are, I don't remember back that far, but 1930s, 40s, 50s, 60s, they are old. They have problems. They leak. They have non-aviation business in them in some cases. They're small. They're not fit for purpose. And when people are being moved on, they're not being moved on to anything anywhere near comparable to what they've got now. I read, Sean, in
the master plan that since privatisation, they have developed 168 hectares of non-aviation development at Moorabbin Airport. And in the same time, they have actually reduced the footprint of aviation.
Yes, so aviation footprint or the apron and hangar areas has reduced from 22.8 hectares down to 16.9. So, they're really, they're trying to condense aviation down because they can earn so much more from the hangars or the space and putting warehousing in. And we've had our grass parking, our apron and taxiways on the west end of the airport pulled up and destroyed and made way for, I don't know, $30, $40 million worth of commercial warehousing. Well, that's not helping aviation at all.
Do you think Moorabbin Airport Corporation have pulled the wool? Do you think that they've actually pulled the wool on the federal government?
I think under the last master plan, I think absolutely. If you read the 2015 master plan and what they say they're going to do and what they've actually done, they're one-liners. There's been we're going to build a road from here to here. And then we're going to build a couple of sheds over there. Well,
I'm aware, Sean, that there's been AOPA members in the last 3 years that I have dealt with directly that approached AOPA because they'd spent over a year and a half basically negotiating for a year and a half to try and get land to which they could build aviation facilities because they wanted to create businesses at Moorabbin. They wanted to physically start an entirely new business, to bring in entirely new jobs and to create entirely new economic thrust and drive for aviation. And after a year and a half of fruitless, endless negotiation going nowhere, they threw their hands in the air and said, these guys actually don't want new businesses at the airport.
Well, they've told that to me because I've asked for a hangar and I've asked for appropriate space for doing what I do down there with regards to medical stuff. And no, not interested. There's no place for you at this airport.
Certainly appears to be an incredibly predatory manner to be managing the site and creating an artificial demand for the sites that they do have. And at the same time, no doubt placing them in a position where they can continue to effectively bullshit the government into believing that there is not enough aviation activity to support the airport size, and therefore supporting a view that non-aviation is their only solution. I mean, if they achieve this current master plan, if this document gets signed by Michael McCormack's office, which I'll make this statement, if Michael McCormack signs off this master plan, make it clear, understand what I'm saying, Australian public and aviation industry. If Michael McCormack signs this master plan, he is telling you that he prefers to do business with property developers and that his interest and his priority is not aviation, and that he actually doesn't give a shit if he sends this aviation industry to the cleaners. If this Deputy Prime Minister signs this document, I think the very next thing the Deputy Prime Minister ought to do is explain whether he's on the payroll of Goodman's or whether he's lined up to get a directorship of Goodman's when he retires out of government. Because there is no reason, there can be no reason as to why a Minister for Aviation, who's supposedly there to protect the aviation industry, who's purportedly our representative to government responsible for fostering and developing aviation, could conscionably sign a master plan that's going to displace aviation, reduce aviation, force aviation jobs off the site, close aviation businesses down in preference to allowing just yet another non-aviation industrial warehouse. And I say it again, if he signs that master plan, then someone needs to be asking some serious questions as to whether he's been given some kind of back-end deal to promise him a position on the board of Goodman's or some other motivation to do it, because you cannot possibly sign that document and believe you're doing this industry a favour. An idiot can read that master plan and can see that that master plan will damage the aviation industry, it will displace aviation businesses, and it will cause more harm to aviation than what it's worth. And so I'm eagerly waiting to see what happens with this, because I fear it will get signed. And I think that there's some serious questions in that for our aviation industry, that if these master plans continue to be signed in the manner in which they're being presented, should we not start publicly asking some very serious questions as to what's motivating those signatures and why these people seem so intent to be doing it? Because it just doesn't make sense. If you're responsible for aviation and your only purpose as the Minister for Aviation is to protect the nation's interests in aviation, why would you be signing massive multi-million dollar, hundreds of millions of dollars of non-aviation development unless you're being motivated to do it? And so I put that question, I'm quite happy for that question to sit with the Deputy Prime Minister. Are you getting paid?
But Ben, shouldn't you be posed? I think this is a theme that is being played out across the board with local councils or state governments or other politicians. I don't think this is isolated. I think the statement you're making is something that should be considered in all deals that we're seeing right now.
Absolutely. I fear that if there were, and this is another reason as to why I personally am such a strong supporter of a federal commission against corruption, because frankly, I think that there really does need to be a focus on the decision-making from infrastructure and the decision-making ministerially on these airports issues, because there is no doubt in my mind that if you go fishing, you might catch some whoppers. And I think we might be frightened of just how big those whoppers are when you get to the bottom of it, because there's been a lot of non-aviation development at these airport sites that just can't easily be explained. And something's going on here. Something is absolutely going on, because they are so adamant and so determined in refusing to do the right thing. And I think the more we ask questions and the more reaction we get from them in their refusal to even want to engage with us, it just amplifies that something is going on in the background here that shouldn't be going on. And so I pray that we get that Commission Against Corruption in the federal sense, because I'll be one of the first people lined up to write an application to the Commission, calling and pleading for a thorough investigation into all of these master plans and the relationships that these companies have with both past and present politicians. Sean's going, Jesus, Ben, did you just say that publicly?
I'm quite happy with everything you've said. I really am. You know, there needs to be some change, because you know there's no point in getting down at Moorabbin Airport and having it all closed away on you. There's no point in sitting there and struggling and fighting and getting nothing out of it. You know, we need 7 hangars replaced, 7 large hangars replaced at Moorabbin Airport. They're talking of taking out another 7. Well, we don't need those taken out. We need them upgraded, and we need space for new operators to arrive at the airport.
But Sean, is it not also a concern that the airport may in fact go and build those new facilities, but those new facilities are going to be extraordinarily expensive for people to try and lease, and the cost thresholds will be so high that the businesses just won't be able to make a go of it? And so they've gotten rid of facilities that were already there that could be leased at a much lower cost threshold. The buildings were perfectly safe. And, you know, by the way, you know, we're going through this situation at Bankstown Airport where they're getting ready to level a lot of the old heritage buildings. And they're claiming, oh, there's all these building code, all this nonsense. And it's just a nonsense. They're pulling the wool. You know, Mr. Deputy Prime Minister, you are being conned. They are pulling the wool. There is nothing wrong with these facilities. And they're taking facilities that are already owned and then replacing them with facilities that cost tens of millions of dollars that they want a return on. It just doesn't stack up.
Ben, don't forget, this is only one little piece of that when you're talking about the buildings on the ground. Aviation businesses don't just need buildings. We need airspace to operate in. And we had a very interesting meeting with Air Services, the airport manager and tenants just recently, where the airport management said, oh, we'll make sure our infrastructure matches the airspace. And we said that's, and because Air Services says they couldn't do anything more with the airspace they've got. We said, no, that's not how it works. The airspace should come first and infrastructure last. So if you take away infrastructure, like a runway, of course, Air Services is going to contract the airspace down to half. And so therefore, if you're actually taking away infrastructure on the ground, you're taking away airspace. If you take away airspace, they can justify taking away more infrastructure. And so it just slowly gets smaller and smaller and smaller until we're left with, oh, this is not a viable airport anymore, and you got to go. And it doesn't matter if you got the money to lease the land. If you got nowhere to fly, you can't do a circuit, well, you're gone. And that's the situation we're facing at the Sunshine Coast Airport, where we can lease a building, but we've got no airspace anymore to fly in. And so therefore we can't actually operate. And therefore, if we can't operate, what's the point of having a building? And so they'll go, great, we'll take the building away because that operator can't be there anymore, go somewhere else. So it's contraction by default.
Well, it certainly looks in many cases, it'd be hard to argue it doesn't seem engineered this way, correct? And isn't it amazing that if, you know, we sit down with an entire room full of pilots and aircraft owners and aviation businesses, that we can look at this as objective humans, people who are trained to operate machinery. I dare say most people in aviation are no fools. And yet we can look at this and it's as plain as daylight, and yet we can't seem to get any airtime with our political representatives to say what is going on and who exactly is calling the shots on all of this. I mean, when was the last time you had? When was the last time the airport management actually sat down with you all as stakeholders to try and understand exactly what you need on the Sunshine Coast?
That has never happened in my experience at the airport. And I talk to other operators and they're very clear. You know, the airport is not interested in what we've got to say.
Yep, I would say second that. I can't even get a response from I wrote a nice email to our CEO the other day, Andrew Brody, and he refuses to write back to me. He purely won't acknowledge the email. So, and what you were saying before about these hangars, Ben, being turned into non-aviation use. Mike's got the problem right there. Mike has 3 or 4 facilities that he basically cannot use at the moment. I've tried leasing one of those facilities off him that are on the southern side of the airfield, and I cannot lease that building because it doesn't fit their program. They told me it doesn't fit their program to have me go and take over Mike's lease, and yet next door to Mike's lease,
what's their program, Simon? What do they mean by their program?
Well, next door is the. Sorry, Simon, go ahead.
You're right, and right next door to Mike's facility, Ben, they've put a it's called coastline signage. So it's a lollipop road sign business full of vehicles and road signs.
So I just want to come back to that question. It's really piqued my interest. So the airport operator, you're approaching the airport operator with a genuine business need to be able to expand and employ more people and grow your business, and the operator is actually refusing you that opportunity, even though that there's a hangar available to do so.
Correct.
And Mike, what's your involvement with this?
Well, we've got one site that is basically all classrooms. We've got 4 organisations that are interested in that building. Now, according to the new master plan, it's going to be a gateway precinct. So that's going to be everything except for aviation, your shops, your childcare, your coffee shops, your whatever. So we said, okay, we've still got 9 years left on our lease. How about if I sublease it out to a coffee shop? Someone that wants to do what's in your master plan. And they've said, no, you can only do what's in the terms of your lease, which is a flight school. I said, well, I can't operate a flight school here anymore. Well, that's not our problem. So
it really is. I mean, it's just utterly disgraceful. I just feel like you're riling my blood pressure, and I'm going to need Dr. Runacres in a minute to run to my aid. I mean, does it not infuriate you guys and make you so angry that this is the way our industry is being managed, and that we are being handcuffed and chained by non-aviation people who are just bastardizing and abusing these airport assets, and that absolutely nobody from within our government seems to give a shit about what's happening, and that just prepared to put their hands in the air and say, let them do what they're going to do. I mean, does it not? I mean, do you not? I mean, I boil on this. I don't know how you guys can remain so calm, and you're right there on the front line with it.
We shed a tear, mate, because I fear that aviation is not what it used to be. And I actually look back, I was the young guy not so long ago, you know, the ambitious young guy doing things. I'm not seeing any ambitious young guys behind or girls behind me. You're either institutionalized in the big organization, you're not going to try to be in GA at the moment. You'll find a lot of organisations even struggle to get chief pilots because no one wants the headache. It's sad, but and Australia should actually be booming compared to the rest of the world just because of where we are. We're a victim of our own stupidity of our politicians, I think.
And would you all support a broad inquiry into the airport privatisation and its impact on industry? I mean, if the government were to announce tomorrow it would actually step up and do a proper inquiry into this, would you guys throw yourselves behind it and freely come forward and sit before the government and testify?
Mate, I would, but I'll put a caveat on there. I don't want some government bureaucrat that knows nothing about aviation running it, and I don't want someone from the Defence Force chairing it. You know, we want to have people that are industry, that know something about general aviation, not about something else. And that's the problem. They're listening to people that have no knowledge of our industry, and even putting people in charge of our industry that have no knowledge of our industry. And hence, away we go. And that's how it's been for many, many years.
At our airport, and Mike knows this, but the person who signed the contract for council to sell the airport to the Palisades, so the contract was signed by our mayor. Our mayor has told us it was the best deal for the community and the aviation community. the mayor now holds manages a 32.5% financial interest in the new owner of the runway or the airport. He manages a 32.5% interest, and he said to us, "This is a good deal for us, our community and our aviation."
Yeah,
I'll call that corrupt.
Yeah.
Kind of like our Deputy Prime Minister announcing $60 million plus for Regional Express, claiming that during COVID he wouldn't pick winners and he wouldn't pick losers. And yet no one's asking the question as to what the relationship between the government and the former Transport Minister, who's the Deputy Chairman of the airline, is. Said it before, say it again. We need a federal commission against corruption, because it appears to me that part of the problem in aviation is because we are such a small industry in terms of votes. Maybe people think that they can get away with blue murder in this sector and that no one's ever going to hold them accountable for it. I mean, it's just absolutely frightening, and it's disgusting, frankly. It's absolutely disgusting when you really get into the center of these discussions, when you learn of all the conflicts of interests and, I'm at a loss with it. And I just feel for you guys. I mean, I'm a bit divorced from it. Working with AOPA as an advocate, I'm tied up in the middle of it, trying to push these issues through to state and federal government, but I'm not there at the coalface at the Sunshine Coast with a business putting up with all of this. And I know that there's just huge frustration with it. And I'm really sorry that you all do not have a stronger representation on this issue, because that's also part of the problem, is that we need incredibly strong industry advocate bodies to be able to take these issues forward. And part of a frustration that I have, and I've really felt it this last 12 months, and Simon, we've had plenty of conversation around it, and I appreciate the calls that you've put to me trying to pep me up a little bit and say, no, Ben, you've got to stay at it. One of the frustrations that I feel is that fellow aircraft owners and pilots and people within the industry seem to divorce themselves from the idea that they are actually part of the solution, and that they sit back and will allow a small group to go and carry the burden of fixing things for the large portion of the industry. And, for people that are going to be watching this broadcast live and people that might be watching the broadcast later on, what I say to you is, it may not be your airport today. It might be an airport on the Sunshine Coast. It could be an airport down in Moorabbin. It might be an airport across in Western Australia, or even at Bankstown Airport or otherwise. And you may not use those airports, and you might consider that these issues don't impact you, but sooner or later, this is coming for your local airfield. This is going to happen to you. And so we need the industry to be behind the body. We need industry to get behind the advocates to make certain that we are given not only the fuel we need to get us to the destination, but you need to give us the financial strength so that we can go and actually lobby the government effectively and powerfully. And so if you're not currently a member of AOPA, I'm going to say it, and I'll be criticised by people saying, you use this issue to plug it. You're damn right. Get yourself in, become a member. No, you're not going to get a magazine. No, we're not going to be able to give you a discount card that'll give you $50 off every tank of gas. But I'll tell you what you do get. You get this. You get an industry body that genuinely cares about these issues and will give people the opportunity to put their voice forward, and will follow that up with government and tenaciously fight at those bloody heels and legs of those politicians to make certain that the issues do at least get heard at some point in time. So, gentlemen, I really do appreciate you all coming and chatting with us. And I know it's a difficult topic for you all. My last issue to speak about tonight, and I'm going to wrap this up as quickly as I can, is just to chat a little bit about what's going on at Birdsville with the Birdsville races. You've all heard that underwing camping has been banned. I mean, talk about cutting your nose off despite your face. The Diamantina Shire Council has decided that what it would do to encourage people to the region and to motivate people to come out to the Birdsville races, it would shove its middle finger clean up at the aviation industry and say, get stuffed with your camping pilots. And if you want to come out here, we're going to force you into our other camping sites where, by the way, you can pay massive fees. Now, everybody accepts that not everybody flies to the Birdsville races and camps under wing. It is a small component of the community that does that. But it's actually quite important, because it actually sends a very large signal to the aviation industry that Birdsville welcomes pilots and aircraft owners and welcomes the aviation industry. Now, unfortunately, the council has prohibited that underwing camping, and for the last several months, AOPA has tenaciously been communicating with the councilors and the CEO to try and make headway. And we have supporting those communications. We have an expert team of airports advocates that comprises of highly experienced airport managers, risk assessors, and other professionals. And it's a very, very disappointing process in which the Diamantina Shire Council is proving to be obstructionate at every single turn. They've thrown every excuse, and each time those excuses have been thrown, we've been able to respond to those excuses and show that they are not valid reasons to prohibit the camping. And we're going to continue to work on it. It's taking time. We're not going to give up on the issue. My next steps will be to start taking the body of work that we have now collected from those responses and to start taking those to a state level and to try and bring the Queensland State Government to bear on that council to fix this issue. And so I just want to throw the question out to each of you. How important is it for local councils and communities all over Australia to open the doors to aviation? And do you consider it a worthwhile activity to be camping under wing? Does it add to, I guess, the attraction of going to those locations? And we might start with Paul, because Paul, you do have a strong focus on recreational aviation. This is something that many people within the RA space are involved in. And so your opinion here really does count. So over to you.
Oh, look, Ben, I think, we're facing some societal issues as well, to be honest, mate. And I remember well a cartoon that really struck me, and it was The Wizard of Id. I don't know if you're familiar with The Wizard of Id. I'll try and be as quick as I can with this, but it used to be back when they had comics in the paper. The Wizard of Id came out one day, and the first frame of the comic showed a caveman looking up at a bird flying above his head, and he was gazing at it in wonder, and the next frame showed the caveman trying to flap his arms and emulate the bird. But of course he couldn't fly like the bird. So then he disappears off screen. And the next frame shows the caveman doing something with his, rock, hammer and chisel. And he's fashioned himself a bow and arrow. And then he walks back on the screen and shoots the bird down. And he walks off content. And I've often looked at that and I thought it's such a metaphor for what we see in aviation. And unfortunately, I think there's an element of, well, we can't do it ourselves, so the next best thing we can do is stop other people doing it. And I think some people, unfortunately, get some personal capital from that. How do we improve that? Well, we need to make aviation more accessible for everyone. We need to let the caveman experience the thing the bird was experiencing, and how do we do that? Well, we've got to make aviation cheaper. We've got to make it more mainstream, and we've got to make it accessible to the masses. And maybe that's the solution. It's a roundabout sort of way of thinking about it, I know, but a lot of these things we're talking about, I can't really see a solution while we're facing such a broad threat to what we do like that. So I think one of the other benefits of AOPA is in raising the public awareness of aviation and the benefits of what we do. We're in a risk-averse society at the moment, but those of us that are still passionate about aviation, we're in the business of inspiring people in a world that's devoid of inspiration, unfortunately. So maybe AOPA has a bigger role to play in terms of public education. See if we can re-spark the enthusiasm for aviation. I might be overly optimistic, but I think that might be the best place to start. And then hopefully when it becomes popularly, viable again, maybe the politicians will look at us instead of the cash handout from the developers.
Mike, you're in the helicopter game, camping under rotors.
Hey, when you're chasing cows, you slept under your helicopter, rolled the swag out. It's nothing better for about a week. Look, Australia was founded on general aviation. You go back to the 60s, 70s and 80s, what a time to be in aviation in Australia. Unfortunately, we've been regulated out of existence, and that regulation's been assisted by money. I'm a passionate general aviation person. I love flying and I love what we do, and we should be able to do it. Get rid of some of the red tape, give us some stability and a consistent playing field, and it'll all happen because we'll make it happen. But we're just not being given the opportunity. The opportunity is being drawn away from us.
I like the idea of camping out under rotors, Mike. I think we might have to line some of that up. Simon, camping out under turbines, jet aircraft to Birdsville.
Well, listen, when all this started coming into play, Ben, I thought, well, you knew what I thought. I said to everyone, just bloody not go to the place for this year's races. You know, everyone in aviation is so time poor, and you know, everyone in aviation normally reacts to things and goes to things with their own aircraft at a moment's notice. And you know, obviously at Birdsville, you can't even get accommodation. So if you can't get accommodation, you can't sleep under your plane, where do you actually go? You know, there's been a lot of good fly-ins around the traps that are all shut down now, basically because they can't afford the insurance to hold the fly-ins. The old station fly-in up there at Gladstone, or inland of Gladstone, there was a prime example. You know, it's costing the Creed family so much money each year now to hold that fly-in, and it's sad. It used to bring you know, probably thousands of people together there out of the aviation community, and certainly in a regional area like Gladstone, it would have been good for it. But Birdsville, I don't know what the motivation for that is, and I just think it's a silly rule, and I believe, along with the silly rules, something that should be removed should be asset cards, so young kids can actually come after school and sweep sheds out, or help out with the engineering teams in the hangars, and actually come and see if they actually like aviation. You know, instead of having to go through spending 6 months down at the aviation college, spend $10,000 and then get placed into a facility they realise, or into an industry they realise they don't even bloody like. So I think first off, the council should help us lobby getting rid of asset cards, so it makes it easier for the general public to actually participate in some way with us.
Asset cards, you're trying to get me in trouble.
Ben, can I just make another quick point on Birdsville, because I didn't really answer your question very directly, although it does play into exactly the theme that I was talking about, and that is, you wouldn't believe the number of students who I've seen over the years whose primary goal when they are getting their private pilot license is to one day be able to fly to the Birdsville races and camp under their aircraft. That's a massive motivator for people, and I know it's a bit of a pilgrimage. It's a bit sort of kitsch, I suppose, but that's what they want to do. So when another visitor's going to Birdsville for the races in their four-wheel drive after the big long dusty drive, and they see an aircraft, see a Cessna or a helicopter with the camping under the road is no good when it rains, Mike. That's the only problem. But when they see the pilots there with their aircraft camping under the wing, they say, you know what, I'm going to do that one day. And that's just the sort of thing that we need.
Sean, you've got this lovely new Cessna 182, and you're effectively the friendly AOPA DAME, flying all around and helping everyone. Are we going to see a Sean Runacres run to the Birdsville races? Would you camp out under wing with your aircraft and complete the pilgrimage?
Oh, look, time would be the factor that would inhibit me from that, and a wife and two kids. But and not growing up in this country, you know, it's not I don't see the rite of passage the same way as other people do. But anything that's tradition should be fostered, and people can learn to fly as a skill, and that's great. But it's the community, the experiences, that's what's really important to people. Sure, I'm having a look on the map to see where Birdsville is on the side, but there are plenty of aspects of aviation that are more than just I can fly an aircraft, and that's what gets the hooks into people. That's what's going to get the younger generation through. And at the moment, that's dying away. It's a real problem.
Well, I've asked the AOPA legal director to do some homework for me and to work out that if I actually go to Birdsville and I camp out under the wing of an aircraft in defiance of the Diamantina Shire Council, whether I've got to go full Mad Morgan bushranger style and commit grand aviation crime to prove a point. But I can tell you this straight up: if this council does not see sense in this, and there really is sense in it, and I would, and I want to say this to the Diamantina Show Council: understand you've taken your course of action. There's nothing wrong with doing a U-turn. There is nothing wrong with turning around on this issue and backtracking to get to a better outcome. There is no benefit to anybody and everyone seeking to simply save face. We have a problem. The solution that's been put forward won't work because it damages the event. It damages the local community. It detracts from Birdsville as a region. We want to continue to support it. Aviation has had a great relationship with Birdsville. It's become a rite of passage for many, many pilots coming into the industry, and it's something that many pilots hold with dear regard that they've actually done it in their lifetime. So we want to see this fixed. We're going to continue to advocate, but I do caution that if we can't get sensibility with it, I may have to go full bushranger, Ned Kelly style, and be camping out underneath the wing of an aeroplane in some ironclad armor just to prove the point. So get ready, Sean. We might have a whole new public relations problem to deal with in the not too distant
Is that going to be our next board meeting location?
But we do need to prove the point. We've got to protect the rights of the aviation industry, and it's something that I'd like to see protected for all those young guys and girls getting in. We've had the opportunity to go do these things. It's a wonderful experience. They need to be able to have access to this as well, and it just makes sense. So hopefully common sense will prevail. Now, just in closing for tonight, thank you, gentlemen, each for joining us. This is actually a really constructive and a brilliant way for the aviation industry to talk about issues and to get out the opinions and the views of those that actually matter the most, the stakeholders of aviation, those that are employing pilots, maintainers, aircraft owners, all those ancillary jobs in aviation, the technical skills and trades industries, and all those other support roles. And the government does need to hear from us. So I really do thank you on behalf of AOPA for joining us and speaking so openly and so honestly about the issues. Apologise that you have to listen to me complain every now and then, but I too get frustrated with these issues because ultimately I think we all care deeply for aviation and we want to see it work. And that is the key to this. None of the conversation that we're having is about let's destroy aviation. It's actually about let's actually empower aviation. Let's unlock the opportunity. Let's unlock the success of aviation, general aviation, small to medium-sized aviation. Let's employ more people. Let's grow it. And we do have to deal with some difficult topics and some difficult subjects to get there. And I thank you all for being fearless in having that conversation tonight. Sean, we've got something very, very special happening next week. You and I are going to be visiting Moorabbin Airport, and we're going to be doing AOPA Facebook Live from Moorabbin. And the purpose of Facebook Live next week is to talk to general aviation businesses and stakeholders at the airport site. And we might even take the AOPA studio on the road and have that camera rolling and give people a first-hand look at just what buildings are on the site and what the condition of those buildings are, so that people can actually be under no misguided illusion as to what the condition of the airport is today. And then we can hear from those voices, the people that are at risk of losing their businesses, their livelihoods, and of course, those that hold the aviation dear and near to them and wanting to see it succeed. So it's going to be a fun time next week. No doubt we're going to be hearing a lot of passion. And so I'm going to be looking forward to it.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to it. Looking forward to hearing from some of the local blokes. Hopefully they can get their stories out.
Unreal. Well, look, thank you guys, everyone, once again. It's always an absolute pleasure to host people on this panel. Let's see what we can do. I'll be writing some letters on behalf of you all to Senator Susan McDonald and some of the other politicians to raise our concerns at the Sunshine Coast. Let's see what we can do working together, because ultimately that's how we are going to tackle the issue. So thank you, everyone. And once again, from AOPA Australia, I hope you all enjoyed our broadcast. If you are supporting of what we're trying to do with these broadcasting, giving the voices or the people, the stakeholders of the industry, a voice on these important issues, then I do invite you to become a member. I'll quickly flash that information on screen right now. If you would like to support us pushing for a stronger, more viable aviation industry, our efforts to try and protect airports in this country, we need your help. We cannot do this without you. We simply cannot do this without the support of members. I know it's frustrating, and I know we'd all like to see AOPA as a very large organisation giving a huge platform of benefits simply to be a member. But right now, what your industry needs from you is it needs you simply to be a member, to stand with us and to give us the resources we need to bring this fight to Canberra so that we can get a sensible outcome for aviation. So I do invite you to jump online to www.aopa.com.au/membership. Become a member, stand with us, and let's get this general aviation industry back up and going again. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you from Moorabbin Airport on Tuesday next week.